Latitude, I'm Maruf Raza. Senior Indian diplomat Devyani Khobragade's arrest and ill treatment by the US federal agents has resulted in a full-scale diplomatic row between New Delhi and Washington. With India staring back, the jury is still out on how soon Devyani's trauma would end. And later in the show, the execution of Abdul Qadir Mullah has created a great divide in Bangladesh, and the ensuing violence has already claimed many lives. In the worst cases of rioting and violence in recent memory in that country, and it could in turn jeopardize the general elections scheduled for early January next year. To discuss the present diplomatic row with the US, we will be joined by former Foreign Minister of India, Mr. Yashwant Sinha. And to understand the present political dynamics in Bangladesh and its importance to the subcontinent, we'll be joined by Mr. Humayun Kabir, who has earlier been the Deputy High Commissioner in India and then Bangladesh's ambassador to the US. In an uncharacteristic hardening of stance, India has stared back at the United States, and the usually silent Dr. Manmohan Singh has called the treatment meted out to the Indian diplomat Devyani Khobragade as deplorable. And in what is considered to be one of the strictest action against any country, the government of India has decided to limit the benefits enjoyed by the US diplomats in India. The question is, how far will this incident impact on Indo-US relations?
Devyani Khobragade, Deputy Consul General in New York, may have been expecting the worst. After all, her maid Sangeeta Richard had vanished from her residence 6 months ago, and the Americans in Delhi, New York and Washington have either been indifferent or even hostile. But what happened to her on 18th of December was completely unprecedented. She was handcuffed outside her daughter's school, taken to the police station, swabbed, asked for a urine sample to check for drugs and put behind bars, even though she's a diplomat covered under the Vienna Convention, leaving India completely outraged. Devyani has been charged with visa fraud and not paying her former maid Sangeeta the minimum wage prescribed in US law.
We feel a very extreme level of distress in terms of a human element that's involved. The person of the officer being subjected to that form of indignity is for us completely unacceptable.
In the meanwhile, lots of contradictions that continue to expose the US, with the US State Department initially making this a Department of Justice issue and later admitting that Secretary of State John Kerry was in the loop.
The Secretary understands very deeply the importance of enforcing our laws and protecting victims, and like all officials in positions of responsibility inside the U.S. government, expects that laws will be followed by everyone here in our country. It's also particularly important to Secretary Kerry that foreign diplomats serving in the United States are accorded respect and dignity, just as we expect our own diplomats should receive overseas as well.
The charges made by U.S. Attorney Preet Bharara only worsened matters and were violently rebutted by the External Affairs Ministry.
When the legal process in another friendly and democratic country is interfered with in this manner, it not only amounts to interference, but also raises the serious concern of calling into question the very legal system of that country. It is our considered view that this statement is one more attempt at a post facto rationalization for an action that should never have taken place in the first instance.
The US stand has been completely exposed, even as it goes into complete damage control mode. No attempts have been made to drop charges against Khobragade. The first conversation between US Undersecretary Wendy Sherman and Foreign Secretary Sujata Singh on Thursday night remained inconclusive. New Delhi cancelled airport passes and limited many benefits enjoyed by US diplomats. India and the United States were in the process of forming a close strategic partnership, but this issue seems to have taken the two countries apart by many years, and the Obama administration has many questions to answer. The US administration's motive continues to remain unclear. Devyani was arrested and ill-treated despite being an Indian diplomat fulfilling her duties in the US, even as Sangeeta Richard and her family have been extended every possible benefit. lots of questions, very little answers from the United States.
Well, it's quite clear that unless Washington moves quickly to undo the damage this incident has done to bilateral ties, several years of diplomatic effort could be undone. And to answer questions on the present diplomatic crisis, we are now joined by Mr. Yashwant Sinha, the former Foreign Minister of India. Mr. Sinha, my first question. Evidence has continued to surface that shows that the arrest and the unacceptable treatment of Devyani Khobragade, an Indian diplomat in the US, was clearly orchestrated by local authorities with an agenda to embarrass and anger India. Do you agree?
Yes, I entirely agree with you, especially in view of the revelation that the husband of the maid, along with the two children, were evacuated by the US from India. This is unprecedented that an Indian national should be evacuated for ostensibly safety reasons to the US by the American embassy in New Delhi.
Well, this isn't the first case of an Indian diplomat taking domestic help abroad or to the US. And it is well-known fact that visas in the past were given repeatedly to maids and household helps in a similar manner as was organized and obtained by Devyani Khobragade, perhaps as part of an unwritten diplomatic arrangement between India and the US and many other Western countries. Then why this sudden change in America's attitude?
It's most baffling, Maruf. To tell you the truth, it's most baffling. And, especially in view of the fact that the Foreign Secretary of India was in the US at that point of time. The Joint Secretary dealing with America was in the US at that point of time. And according to the Vienna Convention, whatever action they wanted to take, they should have first informed the Indian government through the Indian embassy in Washington. No such a step was taken. So that confirms the first suggestion that you made, that it's a conspiracy.
It is felt that America's officials often follow one set of rules for their own citizens and another for the rest of the world. Take the case of Raymond Davis and his extradition from Pakistan, despite murdering Pakistanis in Lahore and then being given a diplomatic status for immunity, or the salaries that American diplomats allegedly pay to their embassy staff in India, as well as to the household helps, which is perhaps below the prescribed norms in the US. What are your views?
The US has not often, always followed double standards. And, somewhere at the back of the mind is the feeling that they are a superpower and they can get away with anything. And they treat other countries, especially third world countries, as inferior countries. They can take them for a ride. So you are quite right in saying, even why only Davis, even in India, I am quite sure that there are people who have been given diplomatic status without deserving it, and that's something which needs to be looked into.
America and India were apparently looking at long-term strategic partnership, but this dip in diplomatic ties is probably going to do more harm to bilateral relations than anything has done since the Pokhran nuclear tests. Can the situation now be quickly reversed?
America has clearly proved that it is not a strategic partner of India in the manner in which they have treated our diplomat. And the very fact that they are now refusing to take back the case, they are not prepared to apologize, will show a hardening in the US position. And this is now not how a strategic partner should behave. So there is obviously a change as far as India is concerned in the US thinking towards India. And I think we have to factor this in and then look at our relationship with the US in future. And the most important point that I like to make to you, Maruf, is this, that we are a great nation, a large nation, and India must stand up to the US and not refuse to be treated as a second-class world citizen.
While it is unlikely that the Obama administration will apologize for the mess that has been created by local authorities in the US, But the onus is clearly on them to put a quick and graceful end to this saga. Coming up next on Latitude, as the authorities in Bangladesh confront large-scale violence, the big question is, could this stall the forthcoming elections in Bangladesh?